for your heart, healing for your home. The Redeemed Marriage Podcast.
Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Redeemed Marriage Podcast. This is Rusty and Heather Bryant. We're glad to be back with you. Guys, we've just wrapped up a very monumental week in our lives, and we got our oldest son married. And so many of you, first of all, we want to just take just a moment just to say thank you, because we got texts all during the week. We've gotten people just sending emails, messages on social media, and so many of you, you are a part of our life journey as well, because you listen to us every week, and so it was just so cool to hear and see people praying for us, and just I just loved reading the messages. And we even, like, there was one particular email that came in during the week from a listener in another country, and it was addressed to Luke. And I just thought it was so cool. Yeah. And so I actually read it to Luke, and for him to just be able to see that people literally all over the world were thinking about him and praying for him. And it was an amazing week. So that was on Friday night of this past week. We got them all married off, and
it was perfect.
Yeah, everything.
It was the most wonderful week ever.
Yep, it was a good week, and we really enjoyed it. We're doing a summer short series. Go ahead.
Summer short, do 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 do. Summer shorts, do 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 do. Summer shorts, do 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 do. Summer shorts. Yay!
It was really funny. We were at lunch today because all of our soccer player guys, all of the Bria players have come into town. They moved in this past week too, so add to the chaos, right? But we took them to lunch after church today, and Heather was like, "Hey, do y'all know the tune to this song?" And she started singing Summer Shorts, and they were all like, "Oh yeah, Baby Shark, Baby Shark."
I was like, "Okay, it's still relevant."
Yeah, it's still relevant. So today, what we actually got a question about the wedding that came in sometime after the wedding, and so we are doing a summer shorts, but we thought we could kind of wrap it into the whole wedding week thing. Right. But it's a question that came in about the wedding. So I'll let you read it if you want to.
And what's so neat about it is we typically don't get a question and then immediately answer it. We take some time to think about it and to pray about which questions we want to answer. But this one was just so obvious because it came in at this time, and it's fresh on our minds and fresh on our hearts. So I thought we could go ahead and address it. So this is what the message said. I was in attendance at your son and daughter-in-law's wedding tonight. The part about marriage being a covenant really caught my attention because I was not raised being taught that. I have always viewed it as a contract. I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about the importance of that on your podcast.
Yeah, so I actually had the honor of performing the wedding. So I was the officiant at the wedding. And one of the things, if you were in attendance or anybody that, if you got to hear any of it, then you probably were able to hear a lot of stuff that we talk about on a regular basis just weaved into the message, which was really cool for me because I haven't done a wedding. It's not like I just go around and do weddings. Right. However, I do think it's a cool thing. And if any of you out there need to get married, I would love. No, it was super fun. But I think the greatest thing for me was being, not only because it was my kid, but really being able to put into words so many things that we have been teaching over the last few years. And so it's been several years since I've done a wedding, and it's definitely been after we started doing our marriage ministry stuff. And so maybe we'll just make that a part of the Redeemed Marriage too.
Well, you did have two more people after the wedding tell you that they wanted you to do their wedding, and you were like, okay.
They did. I'm like, sign me up. I'm there.
That's right.
So
that's right.
I actually had somebody else tell me. I think it was somebody in the wedding party, and they had recently heard their own father do their sister's wedding, and he was like, yours was way better. Maybe you could do mine. Sorry if you're listening.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. But anyway, I just thought that was funny. So I thought what I would do is actually read the part that I wrote
Sure.
and said about the covenant versus contract, because this was really the bulk of the message. And so we had a little intro, and then I told just kind of a story and how they met and stuff, because these are two families that have nothing. I mean, we don't know each other.
Yeah, our paths have not crossed at all
Right.
until this week.
Right. So, and even people home where the wedding was being held here, they didn't know their story of how they met and stuff. So I was able to tell a little bit of that. And then it really just moved straight into this marriage covenant versus contract. So this is basically what I said. I'll have to I think I called their names several times, so maybe I'll leave that part of it out. But basically, here's what I said. Marriage is not a contract. Marriage is a covenant. And that's really important because we live in a world that understands contracts but doesn't always understand covenant. A contract is an agreement between two people, and it's built on terms. It says, I'll do my part as long as you do yours. And in a lot of ways, contracts are built on a level of mistrust. They anticipate what could go wrong, and they protect each other just in case. So a contract says, if you do this, then I will do that. And if those conditions aren't met, the contract can be broken. But a covenant is really different. A covenant is not built on conditions. It's built on commitment. It says if. It doesn't say if.
Yeah.
It says even if. I'm glad I didn't do that during the
for
wedding.
real.
That would have been bad. It doesn't say if. It says even if. Even if things get hard, even if you're not at your best, even if life doesn't go the way we planned, I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. And that kind of covenant is not something that we came up with. It's something that we see all throughout Scripture. God made a covenant with his people, not based on their perfection, but based on his faithfulness. Over and over again, even when people failed, even when they walked away, even when they got it wrong, God stayed. And your marriage is meant to reflect that kind of love. Not a love that says, I'm here as long as everything works out, but a love that says, I'm here even when it doesn't. And that's what you're stepping into today. Not a conditional agreement, but a lifelong covenant. Because the strength of your marriage will not be found in how perfect it is, but in your commitment to stay, to sacrifice, to serve, and to love, even if.
Yeah, it's a good word.
So that was the message about covenant versus contract. I put that in there about how the world really understands contract because everything has a contract nowadays. And it's because, like I said, it's based on mistrust. And so, it's almost an anticipation of what could go wrong. And you sign a contract with somebody because you're anticipating you could do this, and if you do, then I can break the contract, or you have to do this for me because you did this or didn't do this.
Yeah.
And so it's really just anticipating that I can't trust you, so we need to put something in writing.
Well, and I think about even like college football coaches. Like they do a contract, as they come in, like this is how much we'll pay you if you do this job. But if they don't do a good job, you can be bought out of a contract or you can, void it or, all of those things. And so it's not just with jobs. With sports, there's contracts everywhere.
And it's not always that the contracts are just looking at, hey, if you don't do this, then this is the consequence or this is the punishment.
Yeah.
It's also, if you do this for me,
Yes,
then I'll give you more.
That's
I'll
right.
pay you
That's right.
more, So, there's all kinds of incentives in contracts. You make it to this playoff game or you hit this many home runs or you whatever.
Then you get bonus contracts.
You get extra. Yeah. And so, but it's just, I don't really trust that you're going to show up for me. And so I'm going to pay you. But if you show up and if you really show up, then I'll pay you even more.
Yep.
And it's just I think that people go into marriages and they just assume that that's the way it is because that's the way our culture is.
Well, I mean, just like that question, I've always looked at it as a contract. And so what does it look like? I mean, how is it different when you look at a contract, what you've talked about, and look at it different as a covenant? You know, you said in your message that it is not the if you do this, but even if this happens, or even if you aren't on your best day, or even if we're poor, or even if, all the things that are in the traditional vows, that even if those things happen, I'll still be here and we're in it together. And it's not just a covenant with each other, but it's a covenant before God, that I think is such a huge aspect of it. When I confessed to infidelity, I first broke a covenant with the Lord. Like that was what came first. And because I broke that covenant, then it trickled down into it hurt you, and a covenant was broken with us, and then family. I mean, I hear oftentimes you don't sin in a vacuum. It affects generations. It affects lots of people. If those things are not mended, or if they're not fixed, or if they're not redeemed, I should say. And so God's not bigger. I mean, he's bigger than that. I'm not saying that those things are bigger than God's power. He can absolutely fix and redeem things. But I just think that so many times, even when you think, oh yeah, it's a covenant between us, it's a covenant between you and the Lord as well.
Yeah, and covenant is what we see all throughout Scripture, and that's why I put that in there, because it's kind of like, well, I don't really understand what covenant is. And basically what I said in the wedding is that the example of that is that God, we are his creation. We are his perfect creation that he created perfectly. We are the ones that messed it up and brought sin into the world. And so from that, in order for him, his covenant is, these are my people no matter what. Because all along the way, it was just, you could go back and read it, and over and time again, they kept failing. They kept turning their backs on God. They kept worshiping idols. They kept all of the things, and he was still there for them. It wasn't like, well, you've messed this up.
It wasn't conditional.
You're not my people anymore, I love what you said about how when we sin, it's not in a vacuum, that it affects so many people. But I also want to turn that around and say that forgiveness and restoration and redemption is also not in a vacuum.
That's right. And
so for those of you, and I don't know if you want to go a different direction. I know we're making these shorter, or supposed to, you know how that is. And I don't know if you want to go in a different direction, but one of the things that I had thought of was, I wonder if we could just say, if we could think of, what was the one thing, or what was a thing that was just something that you'll never forget about that day, just to let people into our world a little bit. And one of the things that I was going to share actually goes right here, because you were talking about it being, sin not happening in a vacuum. And I thought, well, but redemption doesn't happen in a vacuum either. And I've thought many times about how different that day would have looked if we had made other choices than to fight for our marriage and stay together.
And it's we. Like, I think a lot of people listen to our podcast and think that, that one or the other of us, depending on what side they're on in their story, could have made a different choice. We both could have made a different choice. I could have made a choice to not come back and beg for forgiveness and fight for our marriage, and you could have made a choice not to accept that apology and fight for our marriage. And so both of us had to make that choice to fight for our marriage.
Yep.
And if we had not made that, it would have looked a lot different.
Yeah. And so when the day of our wedding, actually the night before our wedding, our son gave each of us a handwritten letter. And several days before, our now daughter-in-law
We have a daughter-in-law.
gave each of us a card and said, "Open it on the day of the wedding." And so we had those ready. And I don't think I read the one that Luke. No, I do. I think I glanced at yours quickly. I saw it laying out, and I glanced at it, but I did see the one that our daughter-in-law wrote to you, and I read it, and it's just such a sweet story. Her mom passed away several years ago, and so
when she was 17.
Yeah, so she didn't have her mom to make this journey with, and so a lot of that fell on you, which you did so beautifully, and it was great. You loved it, and you loved planning a wedding that you never thought you were going to get to plan. And but just her words to you, were just so special. And for me to think, 15 years ago, I would have never dreamed that day could have happened the way that it did. And you get a letter like that from your future daughter-in-law. But it just says a lot about our story of restoration and redemption, and how, again, it doesn't take place. It affects so many people, just like sin can affect so many people. The restoration and the redemption can affect so many people. But my letter was incredible from Luke, and from her as well. But there, I will always remember this one line that he wrote, and it said, "Dad, thank you for having enough faith in the Lord that you chose to stay with Mom." And it said, "You chose to stay with Mom, and we still had a dad, and you kept showing up as a dad." And, there were lots of things in that letter that I'll think about and cherish forever, and some funny stuff too. But just that was a reminder to me of, our kids, they were affected, but here they are, our kid on his wedding day, and the way that he was affected was to be able to recognize, y'all made a choice, and you made a choice to keep the covenant.
That's right.
And that's what we preached, and that's what I was able to preach about that day. And so much of that message to them was a message that we have lived through, and that's why I shared it with them. But just to hear those words from him of, thank you for having enough faith in God that you chose to stay with Mom. That's not something that, I don't know. I just don't know how many people in the world will get a letter like that,
Sure.
For one, they probably, we know that sometimes that restoration doesn't happen, and so they don't have an opportunity to. But then for someone that can recognize, I have seen, y'all chose this, and because you chose this, here I am today.
Right.
And so, it's generations. And I just say that to people that are out there that are trying to make decisions about, do I keep fighting for this? Is this too far gone? Is this even worth it? But when your kid can go on his wedding day, I recognize what you guys have done. And it's because of that I'm here today doing this.
Yep.
And so it was just a great reminder, and I wanted to remind you guys that are out there listening, and you found our podcast because you're just like, I don't know if I can keep doing this, and is it even worth it? You don't know the ripple effects of your story and your redemption story.
Yeah.
So,
I agree with that.
I don't know if you wanted to jump in and tell your highlight of the.
Yeah.
It was just one thing that I thought of.
Sure. Well, I had lots of highlights because I've told several people it quite literally was one of the greatest weeks of my life. Everything went so well, and just the relational building that happened during the week with our family, with now our daughter-in-law, with friends and family that just showed up. But and of course the letters and all of that, I could pick one of 100 million highlights. But mine was I hate to say it's the number one highlight, but I think right now, as we're talking about covenant and the difference between that and contract, it's what sticks out the most. And it was actually once Luke had already, he walked me down the aisle, and I sat down. Right before I sat down, he hugged me, and we have this little thing. Both of my boys and I do this thing where anytime I say, "I'm glad you're my little boy," they'll say, "I'm glad you're my mom." Logan actually says mom. Luke says mommy every time. And I said, "Hey, I'm so glad you're my little boy." And, he was like, "I'm glad you're my mommy." And then he walked to be with you and Logan. And I sat down, and I had to sit by myself because all three of y'all were up on stage, where normally, the dad sits by the wife,
Right.
but I was by myself, and which I thought was also very interesting because her dad was by himself.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, with that being said, once I sat down, I could just kind of feel, as y'all walked up and you started talking about the difference between covenant and contract, I actually felt a spiritual battle going on in me. And I know, because of the things I've been taught, and because that I know what to do in taking things captive, it was exceedingly short-lived, and I was able to just nip it. But it was the first time. Of course, we were sitting in the chapel of the church that I grew up in, so that was part of it. And then also just the people who were there. There were a lot of people that I thought, who is he to be standing up and talking about the difference between covenant and contract when his own wife couldn't even keep their covenant? And there was a little bit of that in me, defensive of, y'all don't think that about him. He deserves to be up there. He never, broke his contract, and covenant, and it was just me. And then I was like, you know what? This isn't about how dare he be up there saying these words when his own wife couldn't keep her covenant. It was, look at God. Like, look what God did, and look how big he is even in this. And so, like I said, it was very short-lived. It was 2 to 3 minutes of me just battling in my head and my heart of, the enemy's not going to win this day. He's not going to win this moment. And so I was able to push that away, but I was only able to push it away because I remembered how big my God is, and how faithful he is, and how redemptive he is, and that he covered on the cross. Covenant, that's what that is. And he made a covenant with us that he would always love us and forgive us, and forgave us for our sins. And so I was able to take that and apply it and be like, God, I want you to have all the glory from this day. So I'm not giving any more thoughts to that the enemy is trying to steal and kill and destroy my happiness in this moment. And so I was right back on track and was able to just be overwhelmed with hope of, not only because look at what's up on that stage and how amazing God is with his blessings on our family, but also the many, 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 many people that we do coaching with, and that come to retreats and come to intensives and listen to our podcast, that he's big enough for that as well. And so, as you were saying, like, do we keep fighting? Do I keep stepping forward? And the answer is yes. You keep fighting for your marriage and keeping your covenant that you made between your spouse and, of course, with the Lord, and not viewing it as a contract anymore.
Well, our choices led us to be able to stand there that day and actually preach that message.
That's right.
Because we could have, I would have never been able to say those words.
That's right.
And I think that because of that, maybe in a weird sort of way, we're more qualified to preach that message than anybody, because we're supposed to be a reflection and a representation of the relationship between God and his people. And, do I wish that our covenant had not been broken in the way that it did? Of course. Sure. And like those people that are that picture of just this is what a covenant is, and they all have problems and mistrust and betrayal and things that may not be as big and as monumental and as big as consequences as what we did. But I do think, that's the whole story of the Bible. It's covenant was broken, God stayed and restored the covenant to his people. And that's the story of our marriage, Covenant was broken, but it was a choice. It was a choice for you to return, and it was also a choice for me to stay. And I just think it's a perfect picture of the gospel. And so, what better people to preach that than two really broken people that were able to live that out in real life. And so hopefully it honored God, and hopefully it honored Luke and Kamryn. So hey, thank you guys for listening today and for being a part of our journey and just for helping us in so many ways. I mean, so many of you stepped up in ways, even like behind the scenes, like giving them the day and even into this week, like just something that they'll never forget. And it's because of generosity of people that are out there listening to us that have stepped up and said, hey, how can we be a part of this? So we're very grateful. All right, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening.
Peace.
Hope for your heart, healing for your home, the Redeemer.